Hello, in this chapter we're going to look at the 10th move bishop d3 in the 6 bishop g5 variation. The position we're talking about arises after moves e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, takes, knight f6, knight c3, a6. The starting position of the knight here, bishop g5, line e6, f4. We're going now down the main line, bishop e7, queen f3. Here, by the way, I haven't mentioned one fascinating line, that is the so-called Gothenburg variation with h6, bishop h4, and now g5. And there is a very interesting story about it, how in the city of Gothenburg the team of Argentina, the 3 Argentinian players, have coincided to play against 3 Soviet players on the same day, and they were all preparing together, both teams, and there was a fascinating theoretical debate after if g9 d7 and knight takes e6, which is not necessarily the strongest move any longer, but at the time it was considered to be. Takes, check, king f8, and here the Soviet team has unleashed the bishop b5, idea being that after knight e5, when the knight gets attacked, black cannot support it with the other knight to be captured. Fascinating stuff. Lots of surely lots of articles about this story. I just thought I should mention it as well, but that's not what we are going to go for. The line is quite dubious. We're going for obviously queen c7. Again, remember not to start with knight bd7 because of bishop c4, but queen c7, and here a long castle. Bishop d3 first would lead to the same, long castle, knight bd7 here, and now bishop d3. This is the topic of this chapter. In the subsequent chapters, we will look at the move g4, which is the main move. But this still is very relevant. It's a big theoretical line, and we should definitely be aware of it. And here we already have a choice. I certainly recommend the move b5, which is the main theoretical move, but I wish I could recommend the move h6. That would have saved us some memorization work for sure, and it leads to more positional play. The idea is that after bishop h4, black has g5, which is a very nice resource. Especially here it actually works. Similar to that Gothenburg variation, we got this e5 square, so it's even nice that my little Gothenburg story was relevant. And here after knight e5, queen e2, knight f g4, we will regain the g5 pawn. Sometimes even if you don't regain it, you still got compensation because of this tremendous knight on e5, which is in front of the isolated pawn on e4, and white's pieces, the knight on c3, bishop on d3, are quite passive. This pawn controls all the squares, and knight on e5 is really doing a great job. So this position is fine, very fine in fact. But unfortunately, there is more notes in the text. Unfortunately, after h6, a very strong move is queen h3, and here I tried making this work, but it was not really possible. Queen h3 is a strange move, but it does do a good job of preventing h6 g5. White pins the rook, and somehow the concrete variations don't quite work for black. There are ideas of like e5, knight takes e6 sacrifices, and all these kind of things. So here I tried making it work with knight b6, which is probably the best move here, trying to control this d5 square and intending to meet f5 with e5. And this is certainly playable, but it seems that if white knows what he's doing, he's better. So after f5, we play e5, knight b3, and now bishop d7. We're about to finish our development. The king is very safe, and the knight does control the d5 square, but this position is somewhat cramped, and it seems that white is better. And one idea that I'd like to recommend for white here is to play move knight d2, and it's very strong. Now the point is, after long castle, white takes, and now the position looks very good for black because we've still got control over the d5 square, and we've got a bishop pair, but there is the very strong idea bishop c4. That's the whole point. Now if we take, it's going to be this knight d5 intermezzo, and then knight takes c4, and because of the forks we cannot win the piece there. and with this bishop c4 move, white gets the control over the d5 square, and for example, after bishop c6, white can proceed with queen d3, grabbing that d5 square, and this position is somewhat better for white. And I wasn't able to find a full comfortable equality for black, which is a pity, because most people play bishop h4, and that's also what I expect you will encounter most of the times, when g5 is pretty nice. But again, probably you can play h6 if your opponent is not well prepared, but as a repertoire recommendation, I certainly would recommend b5. Rook h1 is what they play. Is white has to bring the rook to the to where the action is along the e file. We play bishop b7, and here white already has a lot of options. Basically, there is the theme of knight d5 sacrifice, and that is something we have to address here. There is a direct knight d5 first of all. Here there are two ways of playing. We can take with the knight. It seems alright. Takes, take on g5, f take g5, and now knight e5. You block the e file, intending to win the pawn after the queen moves, obviously. Queen h2, bishop d5. Now white has g6, very strong idea. Using this pin and softening the e6 pawn, and now after h6, which is the best move, takes, rook f1, queen e7. Black seems to be doing alright. The line continues with king b1, rook f8, a4, and now a very strong move, rook f7. Just trying to get the king to the safety with king f8. That works. Also, e takes d5 after knight d5 is fine. Knight f5, king f8, a move to no, getting out of the pin. E takes d5. Queen g3 here is losing for white, but it's pretty impressive line. Takes bishop e4, rook e4, and now queen c5. Only move. Very important. White is black is inviting white to take on e7 with the knight, and only then does he want to take on e4, because if we take immediately on e4, there is the bishop e7 check. So after queen c5, white can still try bishop h6. Very scary business here, threatening queen g7, but we have it all under control. We take on e4, queen g7, king e8, queen h8, and knight f8, and white is actually a piece down at the end of it, and it's just lost. So queen g3 is not good, but after 13 king f8, there is 14 e takes d5, and the complications seem to be leading to some sort of dynamic equality. After bishop d8, hiding from both the knight and the rook, white follows up with queen g3, intending all sorts of bishop h6 stuff. Play rook g8, and now knight takes g7, rook g7, bishop h6, pinning this rook. By now we are 2 pieces up, so materially we're doing well, but game continues. Knight h5, queen e3. White is threatening checkmate on e8, so knight df6. Actually, at this point, there are a lot of options. Black has 2 extra pieces, so there's no need to panic, but it seems that against everything, white is sort of doing alright. For example, bishop f6, g4, queen a5, g5 leads to sort of a perpetual after bishop b2, king b2, king b4 check, and then king a1, queen c3. So and that is all there. Again, knight d5, both knight takes d5 and pawn takes d5 are good. You can make your own pick. So let's also move queen h3. Again, white is just trying to prepare this knight d5 sacrifice. It is pretty much the idea of the system, the only idea. So after b4, knight d5. I mean, if white were to move his knight backwards, then he would have no play at all. And we would have obviously easy play on the queen side. So knight d5 is the point. Instead of b4 after queen h3, also long castle deserves attention here. But okay, b4 is working. Knight d5, ed, and now king d8. We want to meet knight f5 with bishop f8 here. Rook takes e7. You know, in the bishop g5 neither we should be ready for white to be sacrificing one piece after the other. We take on e7, knight f5 check, king f8, knight takes g7, another spectacular shot, and here h5 does the job pretty convincingly, defending the h6 square, and after queen f5, white is able to achieve equality, but nothing more. We take on g7, take on f6, knight f6, queen g5 check, king f8, queen takes f6. Now we are rook up, but after rook g8, white has a perpetual check with queen h6, rook g7, queen h8, rook g8. So these kind of variations, I don't find them too scary or impressive. I mean, white is sacrificing a bunch of stuff, and then at the end barely makes a draw. I don't find these particularly dangerous attempts or anything, but and I don't think also white is likely to try these, but we should be aware of those and just of these typical ideas, sometimes to go to the king to f8, sometimes to d8, just to know. 12a3 is a move we should be really happy about, and it, by the way, happens a lot on the amateur level also. Even I encounter it in my online games against lower-rated players. Many people don't feel the vibe of this bishop g5 neither. It is very concrete, so white should not lose the time. If white loses the tempo, then the whole thing no longer makes sense. White has to really pound and play very actively dynamic chess. And after a3, we have the tempo for queen b6 hitting the d4 knight, and now the knight goes back, and then we have rook c8. The knight d5 sacrifice no longer makes any sense with the knight from d4 gone to b3, and black is doing very well. The second on c3 is always very unpleasant to face. The same story happens after another waiting move instead of a3, king b1. Then also we play queen b6, and again hitting the knight and opening the c file for the rook, threatening to sacrifice an exchange. 12 queen g3 is the main move. The idea is to prepare knight d5 as well. So here we go b4. There is also an alternative, and I like that we have it, because for white it is also not a lot of fun to prepare this. Now imagine he wants to prepare one of these 4 sacrifices, hoping he forgets something on the way, but then instead of only having to look at the option of b4, he has to also look at the option of h6, and he has to remember so much himself, and then you wonder what's the pole point anyway. Okay, so h6 is an alternative. Now bishop h4 allows us our g5 idea. F takes g5, now knight h5 is possible, also h takes g5 is possible, bishop g5 and rook g8, impeding the bishop, h4, and now b4. If white plays it passively, we have this wonderful e5 square and excellent position, but there is knight d5. You know, we shouldn't be surprised, as I said, in bishop g5 neither. White is always ready to sacrifice. Take on d5, knight f5, now bishop f8, e takes d5 and knight e5, using the fact that the bishop is pinned, and next we want to play knight fd7. After after king b1, we play knight fd7, and now importantly, once the queen leaves to h6, for example, we take on g5. We get rid of this dark square bishop, and we want to castle long. And in terms of material, we've got 2 pieces for the rook, and that's pretty good. But more importantly, we have still this monstrous knight on e5, and that is really something we can always rely on in these positions. The knight is both a defender and an attacker at the same time. After a long castle, black is an excellent position. And that is for h6, bishop h4. There is also the move e5, but again, it's one of these lines where white sacrifices a bunch of pieces brilliantly, only to escape in the end by the skin of his teeth. So that's the same here. D takes e5, f takes e5, h takes g5, and now knight takes e6. Brilliant idea. Fe6. The point is now after ef6, queen g3, there is intermezzo bishop g6, followed by the intermezzo f takes e7. And now white has equal material. After bishop g2, we are still a pawn up, and it is white who has to think of equality, but probably he's there. After h6, the main move is bishop takes f6, in fact, and after bishop takes f6, bishop takes b5 is a very dangerous sacrifice. And in fact, this is the critical tabia of bishop takes of h6 variation on move 12. So after a b9, b5, queen b6, white has a few options here. He can play e5, but it doesn't look too dangerous. We take on e5, f5, bishop e7, and after queen g7, drop back with a rook f8, and we want to castle long next, when our king seems to be pretty safe. Knight takes d6 and rook takes d6 are 2 main moves. So knight d6, we go king f8. Now we want to take on a2. Note that after knight takes a2, we've got this b2 pawn. Here white has 2 moves. He's got a3 and e5. Now a3 is actually quite challenging. White just stops the idea of rook a2, and he keeps some pressure thanks to this knight, and of course our king is not ideal. So here we play knight c5, e5, bishop e7, and white can win back the piece with b4. Now there's a forced line, rook takes a3, bc, queen takes c5. We have returned the piece, and now we've got probably the safer king of the two. The king on f8 is well hidden, the king on c1 is quite exposed, and after knight takes b7, obviously we don't go for the endgame, which would be a disaster because we are still a pawn down, but we've got a queen before, a very strong move. The two knights are still hanging, and we keep the queens on the board, and the king on c1 is still weak. After knight d6 we take rook c3, and after rook e3 we can regain material by queen e3 check, king d2, take on e3, queen e3, and now take on d6. d6 and queen d6, and at the end of this hurricane everything got traded, and we have an equal endgame. That is for 17 a3, and there is also 17 e5, very straightforward. Now we play bishop e7, f5, and now bishop d5. Very important to safeguard this e6 pawn, and as knight takes f7 was a strong threat. Now white plays king b1, then we take on d6, e d6, and play knight f6. It's important that we support our core here in front of the king, the pawns on f7 and e6, and next we want to play h5 and activate our h8 rook. As so often with these kings that are in between two rooks, the king on f8 here is the one I'm talking about. The problem is not so much that the king is weak. In fact, it is not weak at all here, it's fine. The problem is that the rook on h8 is not active. Imagine if the rook was on d8, it would have been all fine, but now the rook on h8, because the rooks are disconnected, the rook on h8 is in a very passive position. But we're going to solve that with the move h5, and that's very important. So do keep in mind that these kings on f8, f1, squares and so on, they are not the problem you have to solve, but this is the rook that you have to address. So here, next is h5, after b3 we play h5, followed by h4 or rook h6, getting the rook into the game, and then we have a pretty fine position with a piece for 3 pawns, dynamically equal position. So at knight d6 there's also rook takes d6. Now we play bishop c6, e5, we have to go back to e7, queen takes g7, now we have to defend our rook with rook f8. And here white can keep up the pressure with f5. Now we have to go for it, take the rook, knight, bishop d6, knight takes d6, now we are up a rook. And the line continues. Actually, there are two ways here to play. We can play king d8 and king e7. I'm not even sure what I prefer after king d8, knight f7, king c7. Our king is running away. We got rook f8, and we are in time here with our counterplay. After e d7, queen b2, check, king d2. We switch with rook g8, activate our rook. Rook takes g2 is incoming. Queen f6, rook g2, rook e2, and rook takes e2, knight takes e2, and queen b4 check. And this is an important check guarding the d6 square, and black is fine. Instead of king d8 on move 20, we also have king e7. And now, after queen takes h6, we have a queen f2 threatening the rook, trying to gain a bit more ground in the center. And after queen g5, f6, queen g7, king d8, white has to move the rook, rook d1. And after queen g2, we are hitting the queen here on g7, and white has to give a perpetual with knight b7, king c8, knight d6, king d8. Again, the typical situation, you know, white's rook down in this bishop g5, neither, but our king is quite exposed, so these things are unavoidable, and we have to be ready to face that. But the good thing is that there were options. h6 is one of the two moves. The other option is b4. b4 is the main move. I think h6 is probably a better try practically. If you're facing a well-prepared opponent, I think he's less likely to be prepared against h6. I think h6 is not very well known. Probably after h6, the old theory could not assess these positions with bishop takes b5 and then this knight d6 and so on. Looks quite dangerous, but as these things work out, I think it's definitely worth a shot. But b4 is the traditional main line, and after knight d5, which is of course the point. Again, white has to sacrifice the knight, otherwise his whole setup makes little sense. And after knight d5, we take e5. Now e5 is more critical. e5 is enough for equality as well. After e5, we take, play knight h5. The queen moves. Wherever it moves, we take on g5. By the way, there's also e6, very beautiful sacrifice, but white is worse there in the end, so it's not very good, but it's very beautiful. So the idea is after knight g3, white takes on f7, king f7, plays rook e7. king g8, and now simply h takes g3, and knight e6 is deadly threat. Or so it looks. I mean, it's not exactly deadly. After knight e6 we have queen e5, but still it looks very beautiful. And white just had actually one light piece for the queen, and still has compensation. But you know, having just one piece for the queen means we can give back a queen for just one piece, so it works both ways. So here we take on g3, knight e6, now play queen e5, and after bishop h4, threatening rook e1, we play knight f8, rook e1, and take the knight, and escaping from the scary rook takes g7 checkmate. And after we take on e6, rook e6, knight takes e6, we are an exchange up here, and after rook takes e6, h5, we get that h8 rook into the game, and being an exchange up, we are better. But it's a scary move to be facing, so it's good. I think good to know that it's not so deadly. After a queen move to h4 or any other square, we take on g5, queen g5, and just protect our knight with g6. We are a piece up, so white is the one who has to prove something, and he does with e6. Now we can play queen f4 check, simply just getting rid of the queens and going into the equal endgame. But knight c5, white also has nothing better than equality. He takes on f7, king f7, rook f1 check, king g8, and knight f5. White has to pose us some threats because he's just a piece down. And after knight f5, we can play knight e6, attacking the queen, and white has a perpetual but nothing more. Knight h6 check, king g7, knight f5, king g8. So e5, not a bad move, but not that great a try. E takes d5 is the main move. Now after king d8, knight c6 check is the main move. Here, if white does the beautiful sacrifice, we take on e7, knight f5. Now we go to d8. King f8, obviously there was going to be some disaster with the queen entering to g7, so we go to d8, and after bishop h4 we play rook g8 and knight h6. And now a very important, in general, a very important sequence to remember, all only moves. Did you see it? King e7, very strong. And after knight g8, rook g8, bishop h7, king goes to f8 after all. So not immediately to f8, because the g7 pawn was hanging first to d8, and then after bishop h4, rook g8, now protecting the g7 pawn, now to e7, and then to f8 after takes, bishop h7, king f8, bishop g8, king g8. White won back some material, but he still got this very weak d5 pawn, and having two pieces for a rook, we are in very good shape here. Knight c6 check is the main move on move 15. Here we take, and this position has been played so many times. I really don't know why white would go for this, obviously, especially against a well-prepared opponent, because there are a few ways that black has already worked out that lead to equality. So queen takes c6 I think is actually easiest. After bishop f6, knight f6, queen g7, that's the point. We play rook e8. Now rook takes e7 wins back some material. We take king e7, rook e1 check, king d7, queen f7, and king c8. And now white has a very strong move, rook e6, making sure he wins at least some material back. And now after takes, king c7, queen f6, rook d8. White is down in exchange, but he's got a couple of pawns, so position is around equal. Instead of knight rook e7, white can also start with queen f7, which is more natural and leads to very similar positions. Here we play rook a7, including this rook into the game, and after rook e7, queen takes f6, white regained an exchange, regained some material, is exchanged down, has two pawns for it, and the position is actually equal. We play queen c5, bring the king to c7, the king is already safe. For example, the endgame after queen g5, king c7, queen takes c5 dc is dynamically equal. One example line is king d2 c4, just trading further material, trading this pawn for this important f pawn. After bishop c4, rook e4, bishop a6, king b6, bishop d3, rook takes f4. It's equal because these pawns are not going anywhere, and neither are those. So this endgame is basically fine for black. Instead of queen c6, also knight c5 is a theoretical move. Honestly, this was not the most creative part of my job for this course. all of that is backed up by lots and lots of correspondent games. So this is this one bit of Najdorf theory that's been already completely worked out. So I have frankly just made my choices, selected a few correspondent games, and refer you to those here. But we do have to know it in case white is going for it. But again, I don't think it's very likely, but still you have to know this. So bishop h4 after knight c5. I actually give black a bunch of options just to also throw white off this, because then he will see that there's nothing to look forward to. There is h6, there is b5 here, there is knight c5 and queen c6. Both are fine. So knight c5, bishop h4, rook g8. Bishop f5 is an option. Then we play a5. There again a few other options. Obviously here white is playing for some sort of a long-term grip, so his compensation is less forced. We have a few options. a5 is okay. Queen e3, knight e6. Knight was hanging because of the pin, and now white plays bishop h3, intending f5. We play rook e8, f5, knight f8, g4. White wants to push g5. We are a piece up, so we can return it with queen c6, g5, king c7. gf we still got from gf we still got bishop f6, and bishop on h4, and queen on e3 is hanging. So white plays queen d4. This again happened in a bunch of corresponding games. Knight 6, d7, f6, and then we take gf, gf, bishop f6, bishop takes f6, and after rook e1, knight e6, position is simplified. I have drawn a lot of arrows, but the position is just very equal after white trades on e6. Obviously, black has queen h1 check, rook g8, and so on. Already there's nothing to worry about at this point. So that's one of the ways to play. 18 bishop takes h7 is I think more popular than we play rook h8, queen takes g7, rook takes h7, queen takes f6. Now very pretty. If we take king c8, I would be very excited if I hadn't seen this line a million times already since my childhood until now. I've seen it way too many times, so that's why I'm not too thrilled. But obviously very exciting stuff going on the board. Here we take on h4. The queen was taboo, but the bishop is not. Queen f7, now rook h8. We have to protect from queen g8 followed by checkmate. Rook e5, white is using the pin along the d file to try and threaten our knight. Knight a4, trying to save it. Rook e3 is how white plays, doubling on the e file, and after rook a7, rook de1, queen takes c6. We lose back one piece, rook e7, queen takes e7, king c8, but we have one piece remaining for these 3 pawns. Knight is coming back to c5, and we have an equal position at this point. So again, some theory to know, and to summarize this bishop d3 move. h6 very practical, avoids all these sacrifices, but I don't think that after queen h3, knight b6 the position is actually fine. I think that white is slightly better, but again not a big deal, and certainly worth a shot, especially because bishop h4 g5 is something you are likely to face. As for b5 after rook e1 bishop b7, yeah, there are a few sacrifices. Against knight d5 there are 2 ways, ed and knight d5. In case of queen h3 there is the bailout with long castle. There is also the b4 where sacrifice leads to equality. And after queen g3 there are 2 ways. Very messy move h6 that is a little bit less on the surface than before, so perhaps a good attempt to surprise your opponent. And there's also this b4 knight d5 ed king d8, and after knight c6 takes. There are 2 ways, both of which, at least 2 ways, both of which are fine. But of course, with the king in the center, these lines are worth studying. In the next chapter, we are going to look at the main line and the line that you are most likely to encounter, because the bishop g5 players are usually theory junkies. They know their stuff, and they know that the way to fight for advantage is g4 here. And for that, I have 2 exciting systems that I'm ready to share with you. So see you in the next chapter, and thank you for watching.